Hello everyone, and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The Il Giardino Party was an annual spectacle that marked the peak of summer and the height of the Marcelli family's power. For centuries, their vineyard had produced wines that were the envy of the world, with their name associated with wealth, power, and status. Electra Marcelli, Giovanni and Isabella's only child, embodied their legacy. At 25, she was about to inherit not only the estate, but also the empire her father had established. Her beauty was only rivaled by her intelligence, and her appeal by her ambition. She was the golden kid, destined for greatness, and the visitors at Il Giardino that night cheered for her future, ignorant that it had already been taken. Luna, a figure who moved with gentle ease, was almost inconspicuous among the dazzling multitude. Her dark eyes followed Electra, not with appreciation, but with cold, calculating intent. Luna had previously been Electra's closest companion, her shadow throughout their golden youth. They had grown up together on the estate, their laughter ringing through the vineyards as they chased each other down the rows of grapevines. But those days were long gone, buried under years of hatred and a festering scar in Luna's heart. To the visitors, Luna was simply another face, a childhood friend who had faded into the background of Electra's glittering existence. To Luna, however, this night marked the culmination of years of planning. The celebration felt like a dream. Tables sagged under the weight of delicacies, roasted pheasant, truffle-dusted risotto, and glasses of Marcelli's greatest vintage, a deep red wine with earthy and historical notes. Musicians performed beneath a canopy of stars, their strings casting a spell over the audience. Electra danced with suitors, her laughter brilliant and her moves fluid. She was the center of the universe, and everything revolved around her. Luna, on the other hand, observed from the outskirts, her hands securely wrapped around a glass she had hardly touched. Inside her pocket, a little vial burned against her flesh, its contents colorless, odorless, and fatal. Luna had kept the poison a secret for several months. She'd gotten it from a scientist in Florence, a man with no inquiries and a preference for privacy. It was a slow-acting toxin, similar to a natural death, a heart gripped by too much wine, dancing, and living. Luna had made a deliberate decision, knowing that no one would be suspected. Electra's death would be tragic, not a crime. Luna believed that the plan was flawless. She had accounted for every aspect and variable except one, the weight of her own heart. Luna's animosity for Electra had not always been as intense. Once, their friendship felt permanent, created in the purity of infancy. They had shared secrets, dreams, and pledges, vowing to stick by each other no matter what. However, as they developed, their distinctions became more pronounced. Electra was the heir, the chosen one, showered with affection and opportunity. Luna, the daughter of a vineyard worker, was always in her mother's shadow, her abilities overlooked and her goals disregarded. The watershed moment came 5 years before, at another Il Giardino party, when Electra's careless comments wrecked Luna's world. It had been a painful moment, even if Electra hadn't intended it that way. Luna had told her buddy about her feelings for Matteo, a young artist who worked at the estate. Luna had poured her heart out, her voice shaking with hope, only for Electra to laugh, a loud, cutting sound that silenced her dreams. "Matteo," Electra had said, her tone full of amusement. "He's charming, Luna, but he is beneath you, and much beneath me." The next day, Matteo left the estate without explanation. Luna later heard that Electra had communicated with her father, implying Matteo was untrustworthy and a distraction. The treachery was an unhealed wound, and Luna's love was reduced to ash. Luna's life has now become a study in patience. She kept close to Electra, playing the character of a devoted friend but harboring contempt. She watched Electra's star rise, each success a reminder of Luna's own anonymity. The Il Giardino party was the ideal setting for her vengeance, a night when the world's eyes were on Electra, and her death would be a spectacle, a tragedy that would reverberate throughout history. Luna had methodically planned it, sneaking into the kitchen during the frenzy of preparations and infusing a single glass of wine with the poison. She was aware of Electra's habits and expected her to sip from her glass during her speech, when all eyes were on her. As the night progressed, the moment neared. Electra entered the stage, her voice clear and commanding as she addressed the audience. She spoke about legacy, the vineyard's past, and her hopes for the future. The visitors hung on her every word, raising their glasses in a toast. Luna stood in the back, her pulse racing and her fingers shaking as she watched Electra raise the poisoned glass to her lips. The world seemed to slow down, with the lamps flickering and the music diminishing. Electra drank, and Luna's breath was lodged in her throat. It was finished. But as Electra continued to speak, her voice firm, Luna's confidence faded. Had she miscalculated? Had the poison been too weak? She felt a sense of panic as her meticulously constructed strategy unraveled. Then, as Electra descended from the stage, her steps faltered. Her fingers pressed against her chest, her face pale in the light of the lanterns. The audience gasped as she stumbled, and her glass shattered on the marble floor. Giovanni dashed to her side, his cries booming through the night, as Electra collapsed, her breath short and her eyes wide with uncertainty. The chaos that ensued was a blur. Guests yelled, staff raced for help, and Giovanni cradled his daughter, asking her to cling on. Luna slipped into the shadows, her heart full with triumph and shame. She'd done it. Electra was vanished, her light quenched, and her legacy taken. But as Luna saw the spectacle unfold, something within her shattered. The weight of what she had done pressed down on her more than she had anticipated. She had expected revenge to feel like liberation and justice. Instead, it seemed like a nothingness, a blackness that consumed her entire being. The days that followed were a cloud of grief. The once thriving Marcelli estate has been transformed into a mausoleum. Giovanni grew older overnight, his anguish a palpable power that quieted the grapes. Isabella, Electra's mother, withdrew inside herself, her eyes empty and her voice silent. The guests who had danced and laughed at Il Giardino now spoke quietly, their recollections of Electra tinged with sadness. The official report stated a cardiac problem, indicating a tragic but natural death. No one suspected poisoning. Nobody suspected Luna. However, Luna was unable to escape herself. She walked through the vineyards at night, haunted by the recollection of Electra's laughter, touch, and trust. The poison had killed more than just Electra. It had also murdered Luna's belief in love, friendship, and hope. She recognized Electra's face in every shadow and heard her voice in the rustle of the vines. Her retribution triumph was short-lived, overtaken with sadness that mirrored Marcelli's own. She had intended to ruin Electra and take everything she had, but in doing so, she had destroyed herself. Years went by, and the Il Giardino celebration was never organized again. The Marcelli vineyard, long a symbol of prestige, has fallen into disrepair. Giovanni sold much of the land because he couldn't stand the memories associated with it. Luna stayed in Tuscany, living quietly in a little village, her name long forgotten by those who knew her. She never spoke about it, never confessed, but the truth was in her eyes, a secret that made her look much older than her age. On peaceful nights, when the stars were low in the hills, Luna would wander to the edge of the old vineyard, where a single olive tree stood as a mute guard. She would sit beneath its branches and mumble apologies to the wind, hoping that they would eventually reach Electra. She had gotten her retribution, but at a price she could never return. The poison had claimed 2 lives that night, Electra's and her own. Electra's laughter echoed across the courtyard of Il Giardino, the candlelight shimmering over her face, making her look even more radiant than before. The evening had a surreal air to it, golden wine poured into crystal glasses, the murmur of violins, the whisper of blooming roses spreading their aroma into the night. Anyone observing saw it as a great celebration, a perfect life. Electra was the shining star at the heart of it all, surrounded by lovers and friends toasting her future. But beneath the brightness and laughter, shadows were growing, unseen, patient, and unavoidable. Luna regarded her from across the table, her smile rehearsed, her hands calm, despite the fact that her chest ached from a tempest she couldn't contain. Others saw her as just another guest, cordial and polite, expressing compliments and clinking glasses. But inside her, memories roared, memories of betrayal, pain, and being discarded like trash. She remembered Electra's vicious voice, her mocking laughter, and how she had twisted knives made of words, choices, and apathy rather than steel. The world adored Electra, but Luna saw another side, one with unseen scars. Tonight, the globe would discover a different truth. Tonight, Luna's meticulously crafted retaliation would take place in silence, veiled in sweetness and cloaked in wine. When the music softened, Electra raised her glass, her robe glinting with each movement. She had always considered herself untouchable, a goddess of silk and diamonds, adored by men and envied by women. She assumed the world will always succumb to her charms. So, why wouldn't she? Fortune had blessed her since birth, opening doors and paving paths wherever she went. People did not say no to Electra. They whispered her name as a benediction and remained in her orbit, as if she were the sun. However, it is sunlight that blinds, and even the brightest star contains the seeds of its own destruction. The poison slipped into her drink unnoticed. A few drips, invisible and tasteless, dissolved into the amber liquid, which shone like honey under the lights. Luna had practiced this moment for months, testing the patience of time itself. The party provided the ideal disguise. So many glasses, hands, and laughing that no one would see the trembling in Electra's hand when it started, the faint paling of her skin, or the way her grin faltered. Death would approach quietly, like a lover leaning in, and no one would notice until it was too late. Electra swallowed, the liquid going down her throat, cool and pleasant. She laughed again, wiping a strand of hair off her cheek as someone related a story. Her hands clasped lightly, and her jewelry chimed. For a minute, the world was hers again, exactly how she liked it, all eyes on her, adulation and light. But then she felt the first ripple, almost too faint to recognize, a flutter deep within her gut. She pushed it aside and resumed her talk, but the flutter returned, heavier now, like a weight crushing against her ribcage. Despite the cool night, she shifted in her chair and fanned herself. Luna leaned forward, her face full of polite concern. "Are you okay?" she questioned quietly, her tone devoid of venom. Electra nodded swiftly, possibly too soon. "It's nothing," she said, her lips trembling slightly. She reached for the glass again, but her fingers slipped on the stem. The room began to tilt, and the laughing echoed strangely in her ears, distant and twisted. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced a grin and maintained her poise. She was Electra, after all. She couldn't break down in front of so many people. Her story did not include any mention of weakness. However, the body does not succumb to pride. It follows only the truth. Minutes passed, and each one tightened the noose. Her heart raced, and her breathing became shallow. The music grew louder, covering her coughing, which became strangling gasps. Her palm clutched the table's edge, and the glasses banged against the wood. Faces turned to her, interest turning into concern, and concern became dread. Someone shouted her name. Someone else rose to grab her as she tumbled out of her chair. The courtyard erupted in commotion, with screams surging, hands reaching, and the musician faltering to quiet. Electra collapsed, her robe spilling around her like spilled water. Her eyes darted wildly, searching, pleading, but she wasn't sure for what. Her chest burned, her veins screamed, and her body betrayed her beauty, leaving her shivering, gasping, and clutching for oxygen like a desperate beast. The poison had done its work quietly and mercilessly, depriving her of grace, poise, and control. And in her final moments, as the world swirled away and the stars faded into nothing, she noticed Luna standing still amidst the chaos, calm and steady, her eyes unblinking. In that look, Electra realized the truth too late. The night that had began with joy ended in stillness, broken only by muffled tears and the hurried steps of servants trying to summon help that would arrive too late. The partygoers whispered in astonished tones, their astonishment swallowing them. How could Electra, the bright and untouchable, be gone? Her body was immobile beneath the roses, her glass overturned, and the wine stained the stone like blood. Luna's expression was unreadable, with just enough sorrow to blend in with the others, but deep inside, underneath the mask, she felt something sharper than triumph and heavier than relief. She felt the empty echo of revenge fulfilled, as much as the emptiness it left. Luna had hoped that Electra's death would set her free, that by watching her adversary fall, the bonds of previous grief would be broken. She had assumed that justice might be written in poison, and that satisfaction would be sweet. But as the night deepened, as the guests withdrew quietly, and the courtyard emptied, leaving only shadows, Luna felt no sweetness. She simply felt the enormous silence of a universe that never changed. The treachery lingered inside her, the scars seared, and the spirit of Electra, despite being dead, lingered more than before. In the days that followed, the city lamented. Flowers were stacked at Electra's door, and letters scribbled with shaking hands expressed their anguish. The headlines described her as if she were a saint, immortalizing her beauty, charm, and compassion. They portrayed her death as tragedy, not justice. They remembered her light, not her violence. And Luna, concealed among the crowd, listened to their remarks with hatred, knowing that the world would never view Electra the way she did. Electra would always be considered golden by them. Luna was invisible to them. Her agony went unnoticed, and her narrative was never told. But there was something even sadder. Even in her own heart, Luna began to feel the tug of recollection as grief rather than rage. She remembered the days before the betrayal, the nights of laughing when they were inseparable, the secrets spoken under the stars, and the warmth of friendship that had once seemed impenetrable. She remembered Electra once looking at her with trust rather than hatred. Even if those days were destroyed and poisoned by cruelty, the memories pierced her harder than any wound. She had slain not just an enemy, but also a part of herself that could never be recovered. Her once powerful revenge had become her jail. Every night, she dreamed of Electra's final look, confusion, supplication, and recognition. Luna told herself it was justice, but her heart spoke otherwise. It spoke of regret, sorrow, and the painful truth that nothing could undo what had been done, not treachery, death, or the emptiness that consumed everything following. Luna had tethered herself to Electra in an attempt to punish her, bonded by sadness rather than malice. Seasons change. The roses at Il Giardino bloomed, faded, and then flowered again. The party's memory faded for the rest of the globe, relegated to the ranks of other tragedies. For Luna, however, time stood still. She moved across the city with hollow steps, carrying a weight that no one else could see. She saw Electra's face in every mirror and heard her giggle in the quietest hours of the night. She had hoped that death would silence her opponent, but it had only made her louder, ringing ceaselessly in Luna's thoughts. So the story ended with grief rather than success. Electra was no longer present, but her shadow remained everlasting. Luna survived, but she, too, was broken, her vengeance a wound that would never heal. In the end, both died, one from poison, the other from grief, and the world went on as usual, unconcerned with their loss.